Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yo to Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, it feels like we've arrived, okay? One more day until the NFL draft. I'm stupid excited. I know the NFL fandom is excited. I know the Chargers fans are excited. Lots and lots and lots could happen tomorrow. Possibilities are endless for the Chargers. We are almost there, Bolt fam. By the way, make sure you guys mark your calendars. If you guys got nothing going on, come check out the director's stream. We're going to be streaming pretty much every single round starting tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific. It's going to be a good time. I'm going to guarantee at least hundreds, maybe thousands of Chargers fans will be in that chat, making it for a very unique and fun experience. Now, today also marks the day for my very last mock draft of the season. Kind of bittersweet, man. I always get a little anxious, like, do we get everything out there? Well, that's going to kind of be the point of today's video, okay? There is a mock draft with prospects and scenarios that I have yet shared with you guys. I have not shared this yet. And I think it could be something that really honestly comes out of left field for Chargers fans because I don't think it's been talked about enough. It's something that could really transform this team, this defense, this offense into something that could be reckoned with this upcoming season. And no, I'm not talking about, my normal dream scenarios that I've been harping about. I want Bijan Robinson in the first round. Maybe we trade up and get a Jalen Hyatt in the second round and then grab some of my guys in the later rounds like Zach Kuntz. No, we're going to do something a little bit different. So guys, buckle up. I don't think you're going to see this one coming. Here's one of my dream scenario mock drafts, my final mock draft of the season in 2023 before getting into the actual draft tomorrow. Now, before we do get started, guys, shout out to the sponsor. Let's get our guy Underdog Fantasy in here, man. If you guys want to get in on the action, join the best fantasy platform on the web. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100. Definitely have a good time there. Before we get started, guys, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into my final Chargers mock draft of the season. Lights, camera, action. My final Chargers mock draft for the 2023 NFL offseason. The NFL draft is tomorrow. This is the last call to submit your sheets, your last call to get those draft predictions in. Here we go, baby. Now, let me set the ground rules once again really, really quickly. This is what I would call not a dream scenario because I do think this is absolutely realistic in terms of where these players have been falling, where I have been seeing these players get drafted. And all together, I would say like consensus rankings really do sort of fit where these guys could potentially be. That being said, this is one of those drafts that, of course, I put together on PFF that really blew my socks off. I've been saving it. I've been wanting to show you guys, one of these final scenarios that could really throw the Bolt fam for a loop. 'Cause I don't know if anybody's seen this coming, but would be one of the best possible draft scenarios for the Chargers. So let's jump right into it, baby. In round one, by the way, no trades in this. In round one, the Chargers at pick 21 are going to bring in one of the biggest difference makers you could possibly get in the first round, especially from this position. And it's surprisingly not going to be on the offensive side of the ball. The Chargers at pick 21 in round one are going to select Myles Murphy, edge out of Clemson. Now, I know it really depends on who you ask whether or not Myles Murphy would even be available at pick 21. And honestly, this is going to be part of that dream scenario that I'm kind of talking about because I have seen plenty of mock drafts, and I'm talking plenty of mock drafts, where Myles Murphy makes it past even the Chargers at pick 21. And this is one of those players that I believe I would take over a majority of the people on offense, the players on offense that I've been harping about all offseason. Okay, it started with, my interest in Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid, the elite tight ends, which really I struggled on showing you guys another mock draft where we take Dalton Kincaid at in round one. but this one really blew my socks off. Again, over guys like Zay Flowers, Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, Jordan Addison, these offensive playmakers that Justin Herbert, I would say, would really benefit from. Myles Murphy is one of those few players I would take over most of them, okay? You could maybe even talk me over a Bijan Robinson, depending on the circumstance and situation with Austin Eckler. Either way, Myles Murphy, the reason why I want this guy on your guys' radar is because let's say this draft does fall in a similar fashion like we've seen in many mock drafts over the past couple of weeks. Myles Murphy continues to fall down the board. Now, first off, I'll tell you that if available at pick 21, this is something that I think the Chargers should absolutely pounce on. What you're getting out of this guy is one of the most athletic freaks that you'll find at the position in the NFL draft. You'll find probably some of the craziest production in terms of what he would offer the Chargers from the edge position immediately, while also solving an issue of what the Chargers are going to be doing in 2024 and beyond with Khalil Mack, et cetera, et cetera. But let's talk about the player specifically. Myles Murphy, why is he kind of falling right now? I feel like the consensus rankings are kind of all over the place with him, right? Some people say they didn't see enough growth. Some people say they don't see enough fit. Some people say they don't see enough consistency. I think that's all kind of being overblown. We see players year in and year out that kind of get overthunk. Does that kind of make sense? Like a Justin Herbert, right? Justin Herbert, a lot of people overthought, right? They overanalyzed. They really kind of stretched their imaginations to fit the narrative that Justin Herbert wasn't one of the best prospects in that draft, which he ended up absolutely being. Myles Murphy, you can almost say that he's being viewed in a similar light. I feel like in terms of the edge class this season, that really bolsters a lot of talent, right? I feel like Myles Murphy is probably deserving among the top like 3 or 4 of those dudes at the edge position. But for whatever reason, narratives change. I feel like if you asked people a month or two ago, Myles Murphy may end up being like the number 3 or the number 2 edge player in this class. Since then, he has fallen quite a bit because maybe a little bit of overthinking. I've seen guys like Luke Van Ness get drafted before him, which absolutely great player, but still, I don't know, man. I feel, again, I don't want to become victim of that. And you know what? At the same time, that whole thinking and that whole mentality does open up a door for the Chargers in the first round to actually find Myles Murphy in a obtainable position for them. And that's why I feel like in my dream scenario, Myles Murphy being available at pick 21, it would be one of those defensive players where I'm not sweating if, let's say, a Zay Flowers was still on the board, or Jordan Addison, or a Quentin Johnson, one of the wide receivers that we really want, or one of the tight ends, which, if I'm being honest, I'm probably a little higher on the tight ends than I am the wide receivers. If a Dalton Kincaid or a Michael Mayer is still available, but Myles Murphy is still there as well, I'm feeling a lot better about selecting him over some of my favorite offensive players this draft. Guys, Myles Murphy, I got to tell you, the Chargers pass rush would be one of the most lethal in the NFL this season. You matching him up with Joey Bosa. You honestly line him up right next to Khalil Mack is what I would imagine for the Chargers, and he would be absolutely insane. I think his ceiling is super high. I think he's got some of the craziest physical attributes you can ask for out of an edge position player. I think this dude could round out being one of the best edge players going into the future, which really says something because this class is absolutely insane. So in my first round of my final mock draft, Myles Murphy is going to round it out for my dream scenario in the first round. Kind of surprising that it ended up not being an offensive player, but again, we're trying to throw you guys something a little bit different here, and I think this would be a player that Chargers fans should be absolutely ecstatic fell to them at pick 21. All right, first round over and done with. And I know, again, it probably threw some of you guys off, but trust me, that would be an awesome pick for the Chargers. Now let's get into round 2. The Chargers at pick 54 are going to go offense, and they are going to hit on a position that I know you guys know that I covet in this draft. You got a couple positions that have some freaks at it. Yeah, I think the edge, tight end, and halfback have some really, really good players in terms of, being able to find some top-tier talent in the later rounds. And I'm going to go ahead and hit on one of those. At pick 54 in round 2, the Chargers are going to select Luke Musgrave, tight end out of Oregon State. And again, this is a guy that we didn't talk a lot about. And I'll go ahead and confess that the biggest reason that I haven't talked much about is, one, he wasn't really, in terms of where we're drafting, a guy that I saw very often. Very recently, I'm starting to see him a lot more available at pick 54. And knowing about this guy's background, it was also a reason why I kind of didn't give him much thought because of, we'll go ahead and say, a little bit of injury concern. He only played a couple of games in 2022 after, I think, suffering an undisclosed knee injury. But I got to tell you guys, in that couple of games, I think he was already close to around 200 yards. I think he had the touchdown. This guy looks absolutely insane. So for those of you like myself who haven't really read up, or not even read up, not talked much about Luke Musgrave, not talked enough about Luke Musgrave, the kind of player that you're getting in this particular tight end would be pretty insane. And again, this could be tight end 1 in a lot of other classes. First off, Musgrave, I think, ended up being one of the fastest tight ends in this class outside of like a Mallory and stuff like that. This dude is pretty dang quick for the position. One of the fastest you're going to find in this class and in many other classes. And it really does translate when you watch his film, when you watch his highlights, I would say as well. He looks more like a big wide receiver out there playing tight end. And like we talked a lot about with the Chargers and how they value and how they select the tight ends for their system, it really does feel like they covet and they value their contributions as a receiver. And that's exactly what you would get out of Luke Musgrave. This dude is fast. This dude is quick. Sure, he maybe needs to work on his route running a little bit. Sure, he's maybe not the best blocker out there, but I feel like the Justin Herbert and the Chargers would have a lot of fun with this dude out there on the field. 6'6". I think he ran a sub 4.6, which again, very fast for the tight end position. And reminds a lot of people, honestly, of Dalton Schultz, I should say. Dalton Schultz, honestly, you know, a lot of Chargers fans wanted him in free agency this offseason for a reason. We got Kellen Moore in the house now as a new offensive coordinator. You get a Luke Musgrave in the second round, who I think has maybe a higher ceiling than Dalton Schultz, especially in terms of his receiving ability and using that speed. I think Chargers fans will be very happy with this guy. Again, the only big red flag that's going to come with his value in the second round is that injury concern, which right now we're hearing shouldn't be a big issue, but of course you never know. So Luke Musgrave, I think in the second round, takes absolute advantage of this really talented tight end class while also giving Justin Herbert maybe his tight end for the foreseeable future in his career. Luke Musgrave would be kind of a steal in the second round, but again, I feel like a lot of people are starting to pass on him due to maybe the availability of better tight ends in the second round. I've seen a lot of mock drafts where you see guys like Darnell Washington and even a Michael Mayer fall into the second round, which just pushes Musgrave down the pecking order. And that's something that I think absolutely could happen. You've got positions like halfback, tight end, and safety that tend to fall. So thinking about Luke Musgrave available at 54 is not too far of a stretch of the imagination for me, and I think it would be a huge hit for the Chargers. There's also other tight ends that I'll be very happy with in the second round, like Tucker Kraft. I think it'd be awesome, that I do think would be available. But in terms of like the top cream of the crop kind of guys that I do think could realistically be there at 54, Luke Musgrave would probably give you your highest ceiling, maybe even highest floor in terms of what you're getting in a receiver. Again, guys, very fast, very tall, maybe not the most physical after the catch, but this dude, he just offers you the kind of weapon at tight end that not a lot of teams have, and that's just a really big wide receiver that can get open and find themselves maybe even as that safety blanket for their quarterback. All right, next up, let's move here into round 3. Director shocking the world with Myles Murphy and Luke Musgrave. What's he going to do next? Well, the Chargers still have a position that they kind of promised the fans that they were going to address, and that's going to be wide receiver. So at pick 85, in round 3, we are going to be selecting a wide receiver. The question is who? There was a couple of wide receivers that I felt I've kind of fallen in love with, like a Marvin Mims, that I would be ecstatic to see in the third round. I don't know if I'm seeing him in the third round as consistently anymore, so I decided to kind of go bold with this one, okay? In round 3 at pick 85, the Chargers would select Trey Palmer, wide receiver out of Nebraska. Now, the biggest reason that you're buying into a Trey Palmer is to fulfill the promise that Tom Telesco wants to deliver on for the fans, and that's adding some speed to this team. I would view Trey Palmer in round 3 as maybe a little bit of a reach. I'm not going to lie. Maybe a little. I think more people view him as a 4th-round prospect, late 4th rounder, but I feel that maybe reaching for the fastest wide receiver in this draft class is not the worst idea, especially if the fastest wide receiver in this draft class also showed a lot of potential in terms of playing the deep part of the field, right? A lot of times you see fast guys that just only really offer that speed, not much more. I would say Trey Palmer can kind of fall into that category in terms of maybe his route tree. Maybe not the most diverse wide receiver out there. Maybe you play him in the slot a little bit more, but he does do a lot of good things in terms of getting open deep. Okay, so maybe his short to intermediate part of the field route running needs some work, which he's going to have mentorship from, Keenan Allen. He's definitely going to help himself out in terms of, learning and growing in the Charger system. But we already know he is definitely very savvy at getting open in the deep part of the field, and that's what the Chargers need right now. And that's why I feel like reaching for a Trey Palmer in the 3rd round is definitely not a bad idea. Ran a 4.33 in the combine, instantly the Chargers' fastest wide receiver on the roster, and this dude would be absolutely killer when paired with Justin Herbert. All of a sudden, you got a pair of Palmers, a pair of Palmers, and Josh Palmer, the guy that can get open, the guy maybe a bit better in contested catch situations, and then Trey Palmer, the burner that can absolutely destroy teams and get open downfield, also helping your quarterback and this entire offense in terms of stretching the defense. So I feel like Trey Palmer, this guy's electric. You go ahead and watch his tape from Nebraska, his highlights even from Nebraska. The guy's absolutely awesome in that part of the field. And I think Chargers fans would absolutely love this guy on the offense with Justin Herbert because, being able to access that part of the field is one thing, but having a quarterback that can deliver the ball to you at that part of the field, that's a completely different ball game. And I feel like Justin Herbert, Trey Palmer, they kind of go, hand in glove. It really does feel like that's going to be a combo that could be lethal going forward. All right, so Trey Palmer, the Chargers fans finally get that speed on offense. It's going to come at wide receiver, and let me remind you, at tight end as well. Luke Musgrave, one of the fastest tight ends in this draft too. So those two guys instantly are going to make this offense a lot better. But we're not done on offense quite yet. Let's get into round 4, where the director, okay, we did go pretty heavy on defense in the 1st round, right? I think that's a huge investment. We can't overlook that. So I want to go pretty heavy on offense for a lot more of this draft. And so far, we got the tight end, we got the wide receiver. There's another player that I've slowly but surely and persistently been falling in love with in the mid to late rounds. I should say in the middle rounds here, okay? The more I watch him, the more I feel like this is something I think the Chargers absolutely need to exercise. It's, I would say, not a shift, but a stretch in identity. Okay, and it comes in the run game. In round 4 at pick 125, the Chargers would select Roschon Johnson, running back out of Texas. Okay, now the Chargers fans, like we were saying before, we all really want a Bijan Robinson. You guys saw my scenario at the top of the video. That's like my dream scenario. I don't think that's going to happen. I honestly don't know if Bijan's going to be available to the Chargers at 21. I'm seeing him drafted and talked about a lot in the teens, late teens, and that does blow. I think that's my favorite player that might be able to reach to the Chargers at pick 21. If he's not there, though, and the Chargers do get a awesome guy like, let's say, Myles Murphy, I would even be happy with, Zay Flowers and these other, offensive players that we've been talking about all offseason. But if we end up not getting a running back in Bijan Robinson early, I think Roschon Johnson is amazing. And I think he's gone wildly overlooked because he's been playing behind Bijan Robinson for most of his career. And I think this dude could end up being a huge steal in the middle rounds for the team that decides to draft him. Now, the reason I say a shift in identity would be required for the Chargers, at least a stretch, is because Roschon is not the kind of running back that you would typically find on a Chargers roster. The Chargers, for the past several seasons, they want, let's say, maybe those scat back kind of types a little bit. They want those shifty guys, those zone runners. That really is the identity of that team on the ground. Certainly in the way that they've constructed their offensive line, too. That's something definitely to keep in mind. But Roschon, he really isn't that. This dude is a physical back. He's like over 6 feet tall. He's huge. He's big. He's definitely not afraid of getting physical. Like, it's definitely in his game to maybe be more of a bruiser. And that's not something that the Chargers have had in a long time, at least not as a featured sort of back, right? And that's why I feel like stretching your identity is definitely not a bad idea, especially if you got a guy like Roschon Johnson available in the middle rounds. I think the Chargers, with the situation that they're in with Austin Eckler, even if, I think Austin Eckler's going to play this season. I don't think he's getting traded. But I also don't know if he's going to be with the Chargers past this season. And if the Chargers want to maybe future-proof their running scheme a little bit while also improving it this season, I think you draft a guy like Roschon. I think you start edging yourself towards maybe featuring a power runner a little bit more. I think, Kellen Moore is going to want to implement that anyway. Why not get one of the best ones in the draft that you can execute in those sort of situations, while also carrying the potential to be a featured back down the line. I do think Rashawn has the ability to be a receiving back, because not only are you getting, a bruiser, but this guy's got a heck of a ability to cut. This guy's got a heck of an ability to block. This guy really is pretty well rounded. He's not a bad receiver either. I think Rashawn Johnson, he's the kind of guy that you can find in the 4th round that helps future-proof your running back position while also adding something this season. He's a heck of an athlete. I think he's going to be awesome to whatever team he goes to. I hope the Chargers are the team that do that, because again, we've needed that short yardage back for a long time. But I want you guys to imagine, if the Chargers are in a bind in 2024, we don't have Austin Eckler, but we do have Rashawn Johnson, Isaiah Spiller running behind, Xander Horvath. That's a really nice combo. You got Rashawn, your bruiser, and you got Isaiah Spiller, your receiving kind of back. I still feel pretty good about the Chargers run game. So Rashawn Johnson, he's going to be my 4th round pick. I like him quite a bit. I'm starting to draft him a lot more in the middle rounds. He's a guy that I'll be super, super happy with in round 4. All right, only a few rounds left here. In round 5, this is where I think you start picking up project players. This is where I start thinking you maybe get a little bit of depth out here. Then players that you think your coaching staff would have the ability to maybe transform into something more than just, a late round guy that's playing behind, your starters. So in round 5, at pick 156, I got the Chargers selecting Rajon Wright, cornerback out of Oregon State. All right, we got some Oregon players in this mock draft. And this is a guy I think you guys put me on to weeks ago, when we put him in a video weeks ago. And this is a guy that, the more I've paid attention to, and the more that I've watched, and the more I've appreciated the way he plays, really fits what I feel like the Chargers would need, and not just a depth guy on the roster, but also a guy that I feel like could potentially develop into something pretty impressive down the line. Rajon Wright, a 6 foot, I believe, 1 or 2 cornerback with some nice speed. But the biggest thing I loved about this dude was his instincts. And it's something that I feel shouldn't be available in this round, this far down the line in the draft. And he consistently is available there. I feel like Rajon Wright definitely has the ability to be a guy that develops into something very special in a system like Brandon Staley provides. This is a guy that I think, again, could end up being a steal, and if at very worst, could help the Chargers out in terms of depth at corner or at DB. I do think, after the cornerback slot position maybe finding itself, a little bit more vacant, with the Chargers having to move on from Bryce Callahan, I think that maybe finding more depth out there is pretty important. I think Jasir Taylor has some upside. I think Rajon Wright would have a lot of upside. You still got guys like J.C. Jackson we're waiting to see from. I think Asante can still play the slot. But again, Brandon Staley, one of those guys that really values the corner position. This is one of my favorite prospects in the later rounds, and I think the Chargers could develop into something in terms of a very quality backup. Very quality backup. All right, guys, last couple of rounds here. In round 6, the Chargers are going to select at pick 200, Mohamed Diabate, linebacker out of Utah. Now, there are a lot of linebackers. I think linebacker should be a position that the Chargers go in on this season. And some of my favorite linebackers you could maybe find in the 4th or 5th round, maybe 3rd round, but I just felt like the value at other players in positions on offense were more important this season. Dorian Williams is probably my favorite guy. You're going to have to draft him in the 3rd or 4th, and I felt the offense deserved more attention this season. But that doesn't mean you can't find guys that maybe have some upside in the later rounds. Mohamed Diabate, this is definitely one of those guys, right? Maybe, there's some potential, I think, there in coverage. I've read a lot about him maybe needing more work in coverage, but from what I've seen, he definitely has potential, right? And that's something that, again, you can expect the Chargers to really emphasize. They do ask their linebackers to cover a lot, but what Diabate already offers that I like a lot, the dude's a great tackler. The dude's, I think, again, instincts are very important to me. And later in the draft, I do tend to try and gear towards guys that at least have those instincts, because, again, that's something that you can work with if you're a coach. And that's something I see a lot in Diabate. I think his positioning looks pretty good. I think his physical game looks really good. I think his commitment on defense looks really good in terms of committing to, let's say, physical plays. That's something I'm looking for in linebackers later in the draft, and I do think that he does express a lot of those traits. And it's somebody that I think, again, has the potential to be drafted a little bit higher. I do think that there's a lot of people out there that see his value, especially in terms of special teams and in terms of depth. But I do think this guy could, at some point, maybe, if you had to call on him, I wouldn't feel too anxious if the Chargers needed to blitz him or the Chargers needed him to help versus the run. Maybe you worry a little bit in coverage, but that's something that, again, the Chargers are going to try and help him out with. So I like that a lot. Round 6, Mohamoud Diabate out of Utah. And then finally, in round 7, the Chargers will round out this draft at pick 239 with some interior offensive line depth with Alex Forsyth. A lot of you guys liked this pick a couple of mock drafts ago. I'm going to stick with it. The Chargers, you can never go wrong with offensive line depth. They've tried the route of going with undrafted guys a lot, with guys that they find after the fact. I think you do need to invest at least one pick in depth for your offensive line. If you can fit your defensive line in there too, that's even a bigger win. But I think at the very worst, you're getting yourself an Alex Forsyth, the former center for Justin Herbert in Oregon. I think this is a great backup option behind Corey Linsley. I think it's a great developmental option. You got your quarterback, a pre-existing relationship is something that you can work with in terms of communication, as well as you got a center right now in Will Clapp that is versatile enough to play guard. I think he played a lot of guard with New Orleans Saints. So it really does help round out your interior offensive lineman depth quite a bit. And it also gives you a little bit of upside with maybe Alex Forsyth could turn into something eventually in terms of maybe the Chargers needed to call on him after the Corey Linsley era, which shouldn't be for a long time, but still you never know. So I like that, man. Alex Forsyth, excuse me, in the 7th round of pick 239. And that's going to do it, Bowl fam. Oh, man, this one's so different. This one is so different from any mock draft that I've done on the channel before. Let's go ahead and recap here really, really quick, because again, if you guys watch my videos, actually, let's go back to this one really quick, because again, this is, if you guys watch my videos, this is something that you've seen a lot kind of said over and over again, because these are the guys that I do want. I want Bijan Robinson, right? I really do. Is he going to be available at pick 21? I'm not so sure anymore. I'm going to lean towards no. But if the Chargers see him at pick 21, that's kind of my guy, right? Outside of a few outliers that I think if they fall, you kind of have to take them, right? Bijan Robinson's my guy. We've talked a lot about, our speedsters and Zay Flowers. Jalen Hyatt, we've talked a little bit about in terms of maybe we trade up for him in the 2nd round. If the Chargers do trade up at any scenario, I would want it to be in the 2nd round for a guy like Jalen Hyatt or a speed wide receiver, right? If you start seeing a run on wide receivers, we've committed to adding speed to this team for Justin Herbert. You got to trade up, okay? And Jalen Hyatt, I think, would be a very worthy player to trade up for. And then we got guys like Zach Kuntz that, you guys seen my guys. But that's why I like this draft a lot, because it is different, right? This draft, in round 1, we're taking advantage of this edge class. We're taking advantage of narratives, pushing guys like Myles Murphy down the board. The Chargers would be so lucky to see a guy like Myles Murphy at 21, and I'm seeing this a lot. I'm telling you guys a lot. I'm seeing Myles Murphy available, and this is a guy that I'm absolutely willing to pull the trigger on over some of my favorite offensive players. But it doesn't mean you're not getting offense. Look what else we did, man. Luke Musgrave. You're getting a freakishly athletic tight end, right? Maybe he's not your traditional tight end. Maybe he's more of a big receiver, but I think that's what the Chargers kind of want. I do think they need more blocking from their tight end, in which case you can get a Tucker Kraft and feel very good about it. But I think Luke Musgrave more fits the identity of this team. Kind of like the argument between Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer. Kincaid fits the Chargers more than Mayer, but that doesn't mean that Mayer doesn't have more to offer in terms of blocking. He does. Musgrave would be fantastic. Round 3, Trey Palmer, the fastest wide receiver in this NFL draft class. That's something worth maybe reaching for a little bit in the 3rd round, and you're fulfilling your promise of adding speed, and this dude would be a huge difference maker for Justin Herbert. In the 4th round, Rashawn Johnson, bruising back. How many seasons have we been saying we need a bruiser out there? We finally get our guy, and he's a guy that you can start scheming around in the future if you have to. In round 5, you get your tall, wide receiver, fast, instinctual, a guy that you can definitely develop into maybe a starter one day. I kind of see that potential. Again, instincts are very important to me, and this guy, he just screams instincts. Him and Diabate, both these guys have instincts that I like quite a bit. And then finally, the backup center, again, a pre-existing relationship with Justin Herbert, super important. This is probably the most outlandish mock draft that I've done in terms of consistency on my draft or in my channel this season, but I think it's an important one to lay out the day before the draft, because again, anything could happen. This could certainly end up being a shade of what the Chargers decide to do. But the names that are available at 21, vastly important to have in front of you, right? Myles Murphy's one of those guys. I think Will McDonald's a guy that some people are passing up on, saying maybe he's more of a later, in your later 20s. I think he would be a worthy guy at pick 21 for the Chargers, right? Then you got other guys that could definitely fall, like Joey Porter or Deonte Banks, that the Chargers could certainly consider. So just keep that in mind. That's why I want Myles Murphy in this draft, because he's one of those guys that did fall that I think the Chargers would have an absolute blast with. Okay, so you guys let me know in the comment section what you thought of this final mock draft on my channel. Again, it's very different, but it's one that I would be very, very excited with. And you guys also let me know some of your favorite draft prospects in the first 3 rounds. Be sure to also mark your calendars, 5 p.m. Pacific. Tomorrow, Thursday, April 27th, we'll be live for the NFL draft, in which we're all going to be shouting and cheering for what the Chargers do in the first round. And also remember, we're going to be live for the following days as well, in day 2 and 3. It's going to be a long 3 days for the director in his, or I should say in my live streaming, but it should be a very good time. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been the director. If you like what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. I got to tell you guys, man, Myles Murphy, that would be an absolute steal in the first round. He would be a monster next to Joey Bosa in the future.